Section 12 of The Light That Failed. This is a LibraryVox recording. All LibraryVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit libraryvox.org. Recording by Zarnaz. The Light That Failed by Rudyard Kipling, Chapter 8, Part 2. He leaned into the darkness, watching the greater darkness of London below him. The chambers stood much higher than the other houses, commanding 100 chimneys, crooked owls that looked like sitting cats as they swung round, and other uncouth brick and zinc mysteries supported by iron stanchions and clamped by 8 pieces. Northward, the lights of Piccadilly Circus and Leicester Square threw a copper-coloured glare above the black roofs, and southward by all the orderly lights of the Thames. A train rolled out across one of the railway bridges, and its thunder drowned for a minute the dull roar of the streets. The Nilghai looked at his watch and said shortly, "There's the Paris night mail. You can book from here to St. Petersburg if you choose." Dick crammed head and shoulders out of the window and looked across the river. Torpenhow came to his side, while the Nilghai passed over quietly to the piano and opened it. Binkie, making himself as large as possible, spread out upon the sofa with the air of one who is not to be lightly disturbed. "Well," said the Nilghai to the 2 pairs of shoulders, "have you never seen this place before?" A steam tug on the river hooted as she towed her barges to wharf. Then the boom of the traffic came into the room. Torpenhow nudged Dick. "Good place to bank in. Bad place to bunk in, Dickie, isn't it?" Dick's chin was in his hand as he answered, in the words of a general not without fame, still looking out on the darkness, "My God, what a city to loot!" Binkie found the night air tickling his whiskers and sneezed plaintively. "We shall give the Binkie dog a cold," said Torpenhow. "Come in," and they withdrew their heads. "You'll be buried in Kensal Green, Dick, one of these days, if it isn't closed by the time you want to go there. Buried within 2 feet of someone else, his wife and his family." "Allah forbid! I shall get away before the time comes. Give a man room to stretch his legs, Mr. Binkie." Dick flung himself down on the sofa and tweaked Binkie's velvet ears, yawning heavily the while. "You'll find that wardrobe case very much out of tune," Torpenhow said to the Nilghai. "It's never touched except by you." "A piece of gross extravagance," Dick grunted. "The Nilghai only comes when I'm out." "That's because you're always out. Howl, Nilghai, and let him hear." The life of the Nilghai is fraud and slaughter. His writings are water, Dickens, and water. But the voice of the Nilghai raised on high makes even the Mahdi glad to die. Dick quoted from Torpenhow's letterpress in the Nangapunga book. "How do they call moose in Canada, Nilghai?" The man laughed. Singing was his one polite accomplishment, as many Prestons in far-off lands had known. "What shall I sing?" said he, turning in the chair. "Moll-row in the morning," said Torpenhow at a venture. "No," said Dick, sharply, and the Nilghai opened his eyes. The old shanty whereof he, among a very few, possessed all the words was not a pretty one, but Dick had heard it many times before without wincing. Without prelude he launched into that stately tune that calls together and troubles the hearts of the gypsies of the sea. "Farewell and adieu to you, Spanish ladies, farewell and adieu to you, ladies of Spain." Dick turned uneasily on the sofa, for he could hear the bows of the Barralong crashing into the green seas on her way to the Southern Cross. Then came the chorus. "We'll rant and we'll roar like true British sailors. We'll rant and we'll roar across the salt seas until we take soundings in the Channel of Old England. From Ushant to Scilly, it's 45 leagues." "35, 35," said Dick petulantly. "Don't tamper with Holy Writ. Go on, Nilghai." "The first land we made it was called the Dead Man," and they sang to the end very vigorously. "That would be a better song if her head were turned the other way. To the Ushant light, for instance," said the Nilghai. "Flinging his arms about like a mad windmill," said Torpenhow. "Give us something else, Nilghai. You are in fine fog-horn form tonight." Give us the Ganges pilot. You sang that in the square the night before Al-Maghrib. By the way, I wonder how many of the chorus are alive tonight," said Dick. Torpenhow considered for a minute. "By Jove, I believe only you and I. Raynor, Viceroy, and Deans, all dead. Vincent caught smallpox in Cairo, carried it here and died of it. Yes, only you and I, and the Nilghai. Umph. And yet the men here who have done their work in a well-warmed studio all their lives, with a policeman at each corner, say that I charge too much for my pictures." "They are buying your work, not your insurance policies, dear child," said the Nilghai. "I gambled with one to get at the other. Don't preach. Go on with the pilot. Where in the world did you get that song?" "On a tombstone," said the Nilghai. "On a tombstone in a distant land. I made it an accompaniment with heaps of bass chords." "Oh, vanity! Begin." And the Nilghai began. "I have slipped my cable, messmates. I am drifting down with the tide. I have my sailing orders while yet an anchor ride. And never on fair June morning have I put out to sea with clearer conscience or better hope, or a heart more light and free. Shoulder to shoulder, Joe, my boy, into the crowd like a wedge. Strike with the hangers, messmates, but do not cut with the edge. Cries Charnock, scatter the faggots, double that Brahmin in two. The tall pale widow for me, Joe, the little brown girl for you. Young Joe, you're nearing 60. Why is your hide so dark? Katy has soft fair blue eyes. Who blackened yours? Why, hark!" They were all singing now, Dick with the roar of the wind of the open sea about his ears as the deep bass voice let itself go. "The morning gun, ho, steady! The arquebuses to me! I ha' sounded the Dutch High Admiral's heart as my lead doth sound the sea. Sounding, sounding the Ganges, floating down with the tide. Moor me close to Charnock, next to my nut-brown bride. My blessing to Kate at Fairlight, all well, my thanks to you. Steady we steer for heaven, through sand-drifts cold and blue." "Now what is there in that nonsense to make a man restless?" said Dick, hauling Binkie from his feet to his chest. "It depends on the man," said Torpenhow. "The man who has been down to look at the sea," said the Nilghai. "I didn't know she was going to upset me in this fashion." "That's what men say when they go to say good-bye to a woman. It's more easy to get rid of 3 women than a piece of one's life and surroundings." "But a woman can be—" began Dick unguardedly. "A piece of one's life," continued Torpenhow. "No, she can't." His face darkened for a moment. "She says she wants to sympathize with you and help you in your work and everything else that clearly a man must do for himself. Then she sends round 5 notes a day to ask why the dickens you haven't been wasting your time with her." "Don't generalize," said the Nilghai. "By the time you arrive at 5 notes a day you must have gone through a good deal and behaved accordingly. Shouldn't begin these things, my son." "I shouldn't have gone down to the sea," said Dick, just a little anxious to change the conversation. "And you shouldn't have sung." "The sea isn't sending you 5 notes a day," said the Nilghai. "No, but I'm fatally compromised. She's an enduring old hag, and I'm sorry I ever met her. Why wasn't I born and bred and dead in a 3-pair back?" "Hear him blaspheming his first love. Why in the world shouldn't you listen to her?" said Torpenhow. Before Dick could reply, the Nilghai lifted up his voice with a shout that shook the windows. In The Men of the Sea, that begins, as all know, "The sea is a wicked old woman," and after rading through 8 lines whose imagery is truthful, ends in a refrain, slow as the clacking of a capstan when the boat comes unwillingly up to the bars where the men sweat and tramp in the shingle. "Ye that bore us, oh, restore us. She's kinder than ye. For the call is on our heart strings," said the Men of the Sea. The Nilghai sang that verse twice with simple cunning, intending that Dick should hear. But Dick was waiting for the farewell of the men to their wives. "Ye that love us, can ye move us? She is dearer than ye, and your sleep will be the sweeter," said the Men of the Sea. The rough words beat like the blows of the waves on the bows of the rickety boat from Lima in the days when Dick was mixing paints, making love, drawing devils and angels in the half-dark, and wondering whether the next minute would put the Italian captain's knife between his shoulder blades. And the go fever, which is more real than many doctors' diseases, waked and raged, urging him who loved Maisie beyond anything in the world to go away and taste the old hot, unregenerate life again, to scuffle, swear, gamble, and love light loves with his fellows, to take ship and know the sea once more, and by her begged pictures to talk to Bernat among the sands of Port Said, while Yellow Tina mixed the drinks, to hear the crackle of musketry, and see the smoke roll outward, thin and thicken again till the shining black faces came through, and in that hell every man was strictly responsible for his own head, and his own alone, and struck with an unfettered arm. It was impossible, utterly impossible, but— "Oh, our father's in the churchyard. She's older than ye, and our graves will be the greener," said the men of the sea. "What is there to hinder?" said Torpenhow, in the long hush that followed the song. "You said a little time since that you wouldn't come for a walk round the world, Torp." "That was months ago, and I only objected to your making money for travelling expenses. You've shot your bolt here, and it has gone home. Go away and do some work and see some things. Get some of the fat off you. You're disgracefully out of condition," said the Nilghai, making a plunge from the chair, and grasping a handful of Dick generally over the right ribs. "Soft as putty. Pure tallow born of overfeeding. Train it off, Dickie. We're all equally cross, Nilghai. Next time you have to take the field you'll sit down, wink your eyes, gasp, and die in a fit. Never mind, you go away on a ship. Go to Lima again, or to Brazil. There's always trouble in South America." "Do you suppose I want to be told where to go? Great heavens, the only difficulty is to know where I am to stop. But I shall stay here, as I have told you before." "Then you'll be buried in Kensal Green and turn into Adipocere with the others," said Torpenhow. "Are you thinking of commissions in hand? Pay forfeit and go. You have money enough to travel as a king if you please." "You have the grisliest notions of amusement, Torp. I think I see myself shipping first class on a 6,000-ton hotel, and asking the third engineer what makes the engines go round, and whether it isn't very warm in the stoke hold. Ho, ho! I should ship as a loafer if ever I shipped at all, which I am not going to do. I shall compromise and go for a small trip to begin with." "That's something at any rate. Where will you go?" said Torpenhow. "It would do you all the good in the world, old man." The Nilghai saw the twinkle in Dick's eye, and refrained from speech. "I shall go in the first place to Rathray's stable, where I shall hire one horse, and take him very carefully as far as Richmond Hill. Then I shall walk him back again in case he should accidentally burst into lather and make Rathray angry. I shall do that tomorrow for the sake of air and exercise." "Bah!" Dick had barely time to throw up his arm and ward off the cushion that the disgusted Torpenhow heaved at his head. "Air and exercise, indeed," said the Nilghai, sitting down heavily on Dick. "Let's give him a little of both. Get the bellows, Torp." At this point the conference broke up in disorder, because Dick would not open his mouth till the Nilghai held his nose fast, and there was some trouble in forcing the nozzle of the bellows between his teeth. And even when it was there he weakly tried to puff against the force of the blast, and his cheeks blew up with a great explosion, and the enemy becoming helpless with laughter, he so beat them over the head with a soft sofa cushion that then became unsewn and distributed its feathers, and Binkie, interfering in Torpenhow's interests, was bundled into the half-empty bag and advised to scratch his way out, which he did after a while, travelling rapidly up and down the floor in the shape of an agitated green haggis. And when he came out looking for satisfaction, the three pillars of his world were picking feathers out of their hair. "A prophet has no honour in his own country," said Dick ruefully, dusting his knees. "This filthy fluff will never brush off my legs." "It was all for your own good," said the Nilghai. "Nothing like air and exercise." "All for your good," said Torpenhow, not in the least with reference to past clowning. It would let you focus things at their proper worth and prevent your becoming slack in this hothouse of a town. Indeed it would, old man. I shouldn't have spoken if I hadn't thought so. Only you make a joke of everything." "Before God, I do no such thing," said Dick quickly and earnestly. "You don't know me if you think that." "I don't think it," said the Nilghai. "How can fellows like ourselves, who know what life and death really mean, dare to make a joke of anything? I know we pretended, to save ourselves from breaking down or going to the other extreme. Can't I see, old man, how you're always anxious about me and try to advise me to make my work better? Do you suppose I don't think about that myself? But you can't help me. You can't help me. Not even you. I must play my own hand alone in my own way." "Hear, hear," from the Nilghai. "What's the one thing in the Nilghai saga that I have never drawn in the Nangapunga book?" Dick continued to Torpenhow, who was a little astonished at the outburst. Now there was one blank page in the book given over to the sketch that Dick had not drawn of the crowning exploit in the Nilghai's life, when that man, being young and forgetting that his body and bones belonged to the paper that employed him, had ridden over sunburned slippery grass in the rear of Bredow's brigade on the day that the troopers flung themselves at Corobar's artillery, and for aught they knew 20 battalions in front to save the battered 24th German Infantry, to give time to decide the fate of Vionville, and to learn ere their remnant came back to Flavigny that cavalry can attack and crumple and break unshaken infantry. Whenever he was inclined to think over a life that might have been better, an income that might have been larger, and a soul that might have been considerably cleaner, the Nilghai would comfort himself with one thought: "I rode with Bredow's brigade at Vionville, and take heart for any lesser battle the next day might bring." "I know," he said very gravely. "I was always glad that you left it out." "I left it out because Nilghai taught me what the German army learned then, and what Schmidt taught their cavalry." "I don't know German. What is it? Take care of the time and the dressing will take care of itself. I must ride my own line to my own beat, old man." "Temp ist Richtung. You have learned your lesson well," said the Nilghai. "He must go alone. He speaks truth, Torp." "Maybe I am as wrong as I can be. Hideously wrong. I must find that out for myself, as I have to think things out for myself. But I daren't turn my head to dress by the next man. It hurts me a great deal more than you know not to be able to go. But I cannot, that's all. I must do my own work and live my own life in my own way, because I am responsible for both. Only don't think I frivol about it, Torp. I have my own matches and sulphur, and I'll make my own hell, thanks." There was an uncomfortable pause. Then Torpenhow said blandly, "What did the governor of North Carolina say to the governor of South Carolina?" "Excellent notion. It is a long time between drinks. There are the makings of a very fine prig in you, Dick," said the Nilghai. "I've liberated my mind, estimable Binkie with the feathers in his mouth." Dick picked up the still indignant one and shook him tenderly. "You're tied up in a sack and made to run about blind, Binkie wee, without any reason, and it has hurt your little feelings. Never mind. Sic volo, sic jubeo, stet pro ration voluntas. And don't sneeze in my eye because I talk Latin. Good night." He went out of the room. "That's distinctly one for you," said the Nilghai. "I told you it was hopeless to meddle with him. He's not pleased. He'd swear at me if he weren't. I can't make it out. He has the go fever upon him and he won't go. I only hope that he may not have to go some day when he doesn't want to," said Torpenhow. In his own room Dick was settling a question with himself, and the question was whether all the world and all that was therein, and a burning desire to exploit both, was worth one threepenny piece thrown into the Thames. "It came of seeing the sea, and I'm a cur to think about it," he decided. "After all, the honeymoon will be that tour, with reservations only. Only I didn't realize that the sea was so strong. I didn't feel it so much when I was with Maisie. These damnable songs did it. He's beginning again." But it was only Herrick's night piece to Julia that the Nilghai sang, and before it was ended Dick reappeared on the threshold, not altogether clothed indeed, but in his right mind, thirsty and at peace. The mood had come and gone with the raising and the falling of the tide by Fort Keeling. End of section 12.